is continually evolving. Today, we witness a shift in tourism paradigm.
And the cultural knowledge that we have is very important.
This one is an Ifugao Bulul that has been lent to us.
Silk screen. So what we need to do is just get the first layer, on the top layer, the measurement.
We will now make sure that you will not be consultant dependent, and you will now be able to put together your own museums with least assistance from the others.
Basic tools that we need to set up the studio. A camera that you're comfortable with, together with it.
Also, generally, museum staff are advised not to pursue.
In doing that, I'd like to focus on the two important words in that formulation, which is to curate and to exhibit. To curate is to...
So why are museums important? Because museums and galleries give us an insight into the history of humankind.
So even John Dewey, who is a prominent leader in
Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of this week's webinar on museum management training. So this morning, we will have our two speakers today. We have architect May Mariano and of course, our guest from Portugal, architect Miguel Sousa. Okay, so let's greet our participants for this morning. Maayong buntag sa inyong tanan. Maabig abukla, kumuyo halban. Mapeng ja agsapa tayo. Mapod-an algo dahyu. Okay. Good morning sa inyong lahat and I hope that everybody is well. Yesterday, we had a very interesting and very practical session on how to go about planning your museum. So today, we will continue our discussion on building your museum. So I would like again to introduce our two world-class architects, Architect May Mariano and Miguel. Hi, Miguel. Are you there already? So do you have an audio ready in place? Fantastic.
Yeah. Can you hear me well?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Thank you, Miguel and Architect May. So without further ado, I will just introduce Miguel later during the session, and we'll have Architect May first on building your museum design and architecture, and we'll have Miguel for museum design experience. So we are very pleased to have you in our session. Okay, Architect May. You're still unmute. Please unmute.
You're muted. Okay. Thank you for joining us this morning. Good morning to all the participants. And this is our part 2 of our discussion of the museum design process. So get ready, take down notes because I'm going to give you some practical steps on how to go about building your museum. So let me share my slides. Okay. Can you see my slide?
Yes.
Okay, I'll do a full screen mode. Okay. All right. So I'm showing this graph again because it's important for us to understand that this graph represents the initial phase. So it's all muddled up because we're threshing out all the things that we need to incorporate in our project. For today, we have to list or we have to gather all the information that we would be needing. This is what you call the technical due diligence. Technical due diligence actually has something to do with your pre-engineering studies and your entitlement process. You have to know if your property has the proper title. You have to know if your property site is feasible to be constructed on. So what are the tools for you to understand, to know if your site is actually feasible? So there's what you call the engineering and on-site survey. You have to get a consultant help you gather all this information. So it is really important to know who the right professionals are who will help you. So technical description, meaning the orientation, where it is located in your area. The orientation, what are the significant adjacent development. It is also important to know the topographic map. If your property site is on the hillside, or if your property site is actually flat, what are the existing utilities? You should know where the fallout, where is the natural drain? Do we have the sources of power? Where do you get your water? Are there any fiber optics on site? So this information will be important for your development. And then secondly, you also need to know the zoning classification of your area. So any local government unit would have your zoning ordinance. And under the zoning ordinance, they would give you the parameters on how can you go about your project development. They will provide for the allowable maximums. Is there a way for you to ask the LGU to have like exemptions if you think the planning parameters do not agree with your design? Yes, there's always you can always apply for exemptions, but will they necessarily give it to you? Maybe not, but then again, maybe so. So you can always try with the local government. And then on the environmental side, you would have your, as part of the technical due diligence requirements, you would also need your consultants to come up with an EGAR. In the industry, you call it the EGAR, not Igor. EGAR. EGAR means Engineering, Geological, and Geohazard Assessment Report. And then the flooding study. Usually this is required for you to assess if you will pass the environmental clearance compliance. So ECC, it's always part of the requirements of the local government. And environmental study, which would have this reports needed. Also, I think I forgot to place here the traffic impact assessment. So you would need the TIAs, you would need transport transport planners to help you come up with a TIA. So when you do come up with a TIA, it means that area is heavily populated. You don't want to add more to the traffic. So what the designer or your architect will do is help mitigate the traffic by understanding correctly the vehicular and pedestrian flow of your particular project site. And then these are all the baseline data references for the project site analysis. And all of this information that you have gathered will provide the design context for your project development. So each site is unique. So each site will actually provide a unique design architecture because it has its own design context. It has its own context. Okay. So upon the building application process, so you have gathered, remember yesterday I showed you the design process. You have your concept, you have your schematic, you have design development. So if your project is in a rush and you want everything to give it to the local government, so you can already get your building permits at the development stage, you can actually apply for your building permit. But it is better if you have everything done, the construction documentation done. In the development industry, at DD phase, everything is always compressed. You're always in a time crunch. Okay. So when I say development permit, this is for the land development. Maybe your project would have like a mixed use requirement, then probably that will be a development permit. But if it's just a single building, you only apply for the building permit. Building permit is for the one structure. Development permit is for the bigger scale development. And of course, before you get your building permit, it has to pass through a code compliance review. If you are complying with your zoning and building code, if you are complying with your fire code, fire code is necessary because it will allow for your, in case there will be fire, in case there will be tsunamis, earthquakes. So your plan should have the necessary exits, and then the fire handling, your stairs should be able to handle the correct number of people within the time that you can exit. So it's a whole code review, which is very important. And also the accessibility code. It's the BP 344, Batasang Pambansa 344, which is for your disabled, for the disabled accessibilities. And then, of course, if the green ordinance is already a bill, or some of the local government units already adapted the green ordinance, and you should also be compliant with it. So will you lose anything if you're not complying with the, if you are complying with green ordinance? You're not going to lose anything. In fact, you're giving more quality to your development. And maybe there are other local ordinances that you would need to know with reference to your local government unit. So you should have a close correlation with your local government officials. Oops. Okay. Okay. During the construction process, so you already got your building permit. And then during the construction process, you would need to establish a technical working group. If your technical working group is not as savvy or does not really have the capability, you can actually hire a project management group. There are project management groups out there. Who are they? There are many you can tap, and I can provide you a list of who they are. And then what do? They represent the needs, they represent the requirements, the needs of the project. What do they monitor? They monitor the time. Is it within schedule? Is it within budget? Are they following the design within the right time, within the right budget? And then, is the contractor doing quality workmanship? So it is the PMG's or the technical working group's job to actually verify the quality of construction. So usually in the development industry, there will always be meetings. If it's already construction time, almost every week there should be a technical working group or project management group team meetings, technical meetings. So to keep checking, to keep monitoring the process, to minimize mistakes, to minimize errors, or to eliminate errors. Okay, so it is important to champion the museum design's intent all throughout the building process. This is to ascertain the follow-through of the concept to realization, because designs are championed all throughout the construction process. Because there are many horror stories that's happening that the design was this, and then the actual construction was this. So we have to eliminate that thing from happening. So what do? The PMG or the TWG will have to champion that design. So during the post-construction, meaning if everything is done already, what do? Testing and commissioning the facilities. You have to test the air conditioning. Is it cooling enough? Did we have the right units to actually condition the indoor air quality of our exhibition spaces? Do we have the right lighting? Is everything correct? And all those specialty equipment, maybe mechanical that can go up and down or whatever. Maybe the lifts, the escalators, the elevators. And then the operation and maintenance. So it is important for us to ask the contractor, especially the general contractor, to give us the as-built drawings to be turned over by the general contractor, and the specialty equipment. So we have to make sure after the construction of the museum, there are the documentations that the general contractor should give us. It's going to be the as-built. It's not the plan from the architect. It is the as-built drawing by the contractor. As-built is different from the architectural design plan document by the architect. Okay, those are two different things. In the industry, this is always overlooked. I have to admit, it always happens that this particular detail is always forgotten in the end, because everybody's like so excited in the end, you know, we're gonna open. Oh, just pay the contractor. But there's no necessarily turnover of documents that's happening. Let's say maybe in the industry here, especially here in the Philippines, maybe 20% does that. So it's important for us to get the as-built drawings, because that will be the future reference. That will be a reference. If something happens in our building, if there are leaks, if so we have to go back to the how the contractor design, how the contractor built it, and then it will be easier for us to correct it. Okay, that is very important. And also for so your general contractor should be doing the diligence to collect all the instructional handbook from the specialty equipment suppliers. So if you have like a special equipment and you don't know how to fix it when it's broke, you need to have that handbook. And everything has to be collected, and you know where it is. There's always a reference book to everything. So those little things are always overlooked, and it's so important. So when you start your museum project, make sure, put that in your checklist. And before you give your final payment to the contractor or to the supplier, make sure you have all those documentation. And then of course, during post-construction, you cannot occupy a building without an occupancy permit, because once you're issued with an occupancy permit, the LGU becomes now accountable because they gave you the permit. It means that building is secure and in compliance to all the codes that was required by the local government. Okay. Pre-opening. So after you secure the occupancy permit, you can do an ingress. So when you do an ingress, you can now come up with your wayfinding and environmental graphics design and installation. So it doesn't, kasi here in the Philippines, what we do is right after we, the contractor finished, not really finished, but slightly finished the establishment, the developer would rush in, and then the next day it opens. It shouldn't be like that, because you need to do all those testing, all those commissioning. At the same time, you have to fix the place. So when does the wayfinding environmental graphics design, the actual design, come in? It should be way, way, way before the pre-opening. During the pre-opening, that's the only time you'll do the installation. Okay? And then of course, the ingress of the installation of exhibits, your artifacts, artworks, materials for display. So you know how it works now operationally. There's some sort of a testing on how to ingress and egress your materials. And then the fit out of front of house areas like the arrival lobby, the lounges, the cafes, it can happen during pre-opening. So what are the key components? There are the two key components. I reduce it to two key components, the front of house and the back of house. Front of house, these are the arrival lobbies. I showed you some images yesterday, so you already have the idea. The arrival lobbies, the public restrooms, the exhibition halls, cafes and restaurants, theater halls, the corridors, the negative spaces, the anterooms, and the event spaces. Back of house are the storage rooms, utilities such as AHUs, the security and control rooms. Sometimes there are already data centers that's incorporated in these big facilities. Your kitchen, your maintenance areas, especially your materials recovery facility, you need to bring that in. And then while you are doing your decision, this decision needs to happen before the actual design and planning. How many percentage of front of house versus the back of the house are you willing to budget for? So you will have to already quantify how much area you would need to allocate for your back of house, because back of house, although you don't see it, it's very important to have your whole facility be operated. Okay, so those are the major notes. Now the good stuff. Best practices. So what I'm showing here is the Guggenheim, the Solomon Guggenheim in New York. This is designed by the prominent 20th century architect, Frank Lloyd Wright. And his idea of this structure is actually, well, Solomon Guggenheim actually hired him. He was engaged, and the main requirement to Frank Lloyd Wright is to make this museum so unique that you haven't seen anything like it in the world. That was the requirement by the owner of this museum. So what Frank Lloyd Wright did at that time, this was back in 1946 to 1959, before his death, he completed this structure. As we all know, when you go through your history books, Frank Lloyd Wright is a proponent for organic architecture. So let nature dictate the design of your architecture. So he really liked the site because it is front of the Central Park in New York. And then, of course, his forms follow function is already there. You can see it. And then as much as practicable, he would integrate ornamentations and would reflect nature in his architecture. So this is an example of organic architecture, and form follow function concept. And then you go to Guggenheim Museum in New York because of its architecture. Well, for me, it's because of architecture. To the left, you would see it's a wall, and their exhibited material is just like a blank canvas. So I did not understand that, but I didn't care because Guggenheim Museum is like a piece de resistance museum. It's really beautiful. And to the right, it's a Picasso and a Claude Monet. And it was okay. There was like a big wall dedicated to it because it's so precious. But the architecture is like really why you go to the Guggenheim Museum in New York. And then I'm showing this image because it is incorporated in the streetscape. Like yesterday, I was saying, most museums can be a landmark, a destination, or people can just pass by and go to it. So this architecture is actually right besides Fifth Avenue, and then you can actually enter the museum. And then this is the Louvre Museum in Abu Dhabi. So this is a partnership between the United Emirates and the government of France. This particular establishment can only use the name of Louvre until 2037. The architect for this is the Pritzker Prize winner, Jean Nouvel. and its architecture is inspired by the sun and shade, sun and the desert, because this is in an island and in the middle of the desert. And then it has some congregation space, and it only has about 700 exhibition materials. It's not as comprehensive as the Louvre in Paris, but it has several loans from the Louvre of Paris, and then it also has some contemporary exhibits. You also go there because of its architecture. And that's how it feels inside. Was I impressed? It's okay. It's something to go to when you're in that place in the desert. And the piece de resistance artwork there is loaned from Paris, and this is Napoleon painting. I think it's borrowed during the golden age of the Dutch period, and yeah, so that ends. That's the point. That ends the storyline of this whole museum. And then this is the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam. It's beautiful because it's the story of Van Gogh and how the brother of Vincent van Gogh pushed for this museum to happen. That's why he's popular these days. And this is the architecture is double laminated glass, and every panel there is bespoke because it's circumferential. And this is the Museum of the Future in Dubai. The first time I heard of this is back in 2018. And it was presented in a conference by the designer. This is Sean Killa Design. He kind of killed for this design. So when you look at this Museum of the Future, the form here, he was saying, it looks like an eye, so it's looking to the future. And how does the future look like? Back in 2018, it was still undergoing construction, but in February 22, 2022, it was inaugurated during the Dubai Expo 2020. And inside it, there are no columns. Everything is in space frame. And the exhibitions are actually technology. It's the past and the future. They have their space station there, and everything is mostly digital and augmented reality exhibitions. And there are like innovations there. It's an innovative museum. And then if you're gonna ask, what are those patterns there? During the conference, the principal architect was saying that those Arabic impressions there are actually the poetry of the Sheikh of Dubai, the ruler of Dubai. So it's the architect's way of it's the architect's way of I don't know, kissing the ass of the ruler of Dubai. I don't know, but I think it works, and it's spectacular when you go there, and people go there. People go to Dubai just to see this museum. And these are real images. They're not renderings. Those are real images. And that's international, and we go to local. Here are the local museums. One of the known ones are the Ayala Museum because of its diorama. Most of us have been there. This is actually the new site of the Ayala Museum. Before, it used to be in the old mall, but now it's integrated in Greenbelt 5. And you would see here the connection to the pedestrian. You can actually go to Ayala Museum by walking. And then this is the Yuchengco Museum. It's also in Ayala. It's also in the premier business district here in Manila. And one thing wrong with this Yuchengco Museum is it's hard to go to the museum because it's not as visible, and it's like tucked behind the entryway of the main entryway of the office building. So that's why it's not as popular compared to the Ayala Museum. And the Mine Museum, this is actually in BGC. It's in the park, and it targets the younger population, and it is a lot of science and innovation museum. And this is the Pinto Museum. This is not in the city center, but this is in the Rizal province in Antipolo. And people go there because of the art, because of the place, and because of it's just beautiful there. Sometimes it also becomes an event. So this ends the part of my presentation. Now I would like to segue to Miguel. And Miguel will now share his museum design experience. So I'll stop sharing, and then Miguel. Iking, will you like to introduce Miguel?
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation, Architect May, for giving us some pointers on the building requirements and all, and also a tour for the lovely museums around the world. No? So for this second session, we welcome Architect Miguel Sousa. I will just share his brief bio. So he's very, so let me greet Miguel. Bom dia. Good morning, Miguel. Thank you for joining us this morning. I know it's early morning there, maybe around 3 a.m. in the morning. So
I call it a very late night.
Oh, is it? Okay. So this is the brief bio of Miguel, Architect Miguel. No? So as you can see, he is multi-talented with his passion for designing, and he also did some projects, award-winning projects in different parts of the world, such as in Jakarta, in Manila, in Portugal, and in the Caribbean. No? So this is the world's largest cruise ship terminal. And he also worked with international firms such as the Broadway Malin and the Buchan Group in studios worldwide. Okay, so you can actually look at Gummavitta. I checked on the website, if I can just share. So this is, hold on. So this is a firm that is led by Miguel. He's the principal author, principal architect, no, for the Gummavitta. So if you are interested to look at that, there's a website where you can visit some of the projects, the philosophy behind the Gummavitta architecture and design. And Miguel is the principal architect for this. So the call is Gummavitta is a collective of specialized designers with a global presence. So I like also the website because it's project-centric design approach, no, focusing on context and reject a predefined signature style. So it's very unique, no, as an architectural studio and planning and design and all. So without further ado, we'd like to welcome our special resource person today, Architect Miguel Sousa.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, full screen mode. All right. Well, first of all, thank you, May, for inviting me. It's a pleasure for me to be a part of this presentation. And just like yesterday, I thought your presentation was very informative. And also the examples you showed. I, like you, share a great passion for architecture and some of the most inspiring architecture we find in museums. So it was great to see some examples that I knew and have visited, some that I haven't, like the one in Dubai. I would like to basically, the introductions have been made. So Gummavitta is a collective of international designers. Our partner in the Philippines is architect Mariano. It's a joy for me to accompany her in this presentation. I am presenting from Portugal, and indeed it's very late at night here, but I was really excited to wait and to be a part of this presentation. And I will try my best to sound fresh and coherent. I have a few notes with me, just to make sure. I have a special relationship with the Philippines. I've lived in Southeast Asia, in Singapore, for more than 10 years. And during that time, the Philippines were my main market. These are just some examples of projects that I led in the Philippines. We see examples here in Manila, in Batangas, but in Davao, in Cebu. I've done projects and really thoroughly enjoyed the experience of interacting with the Philippine culture. I actually miss being there, and I hope this year I get to go again. And I'm planning for that, and I'm looking forward to it. I am here to tell you about museum design experience. And interesting, the word experience, because this slide you see here is always on our presentations, because we do try to create meaningful experience. And so that just plays along with what we're talking about here. And it's one of our core aspirations at Gummavitta. Let's move into the projects. In the next few slides, I will present a series of projects, and we can roughly separate them into three types: permanent exhibitions, temporary exhibitions, and installations. The first one is the Johnny Walker House in Beijing, and this is a permanent exhibition. So we designed architecture, interiors, and the exhibition inside. The Johnny Walker House, it's a members club, a museum and a lounge. It was conceived with the intent to immerse consumers in the world of Johnny Walker whiskey. So the building is spread across two levels with a series of rooms with different atmospheres. And it was all about telling stories, whether it was the story of the brand, which was, there were exhibitions about the history of whiskey making, the brand itself and the products, but also the space and the building created all of these different rooms and lounges that brought friends together, that enabled, this communication and sharing of ideas, people telling their own story, not just the story of the brand. And so it's a project that is, it's beyond the museum, and everybody interacts in the way that you're a part of the story. Another word that's really important for us is communities. And the design, when we do a design, we always try to find ways to integrate the community or make sure that that design helps the community thrive. So the next project is a project that's very close to my heart. This is the city where I was born, in the north of Portugal. And the Caracas Theatre has been the sort of cultural center of the city, is the building you see on the bottom right. And it's been there since the 60s, and it badly needs renovations. In 2016-17, I was made aware of a competition for the renovation of this building. And I took part in it, and fortunately my design won. So it's now under construction. It's actually supposed to open in June, and I can't wait for it. Caracas is a cultural center. So it has two main amphitheaters, conference rooms, and a space for temporary exhibitions. Now, what's most relevant about this project in the context of this presentation is that it falls in the category of adaptive reuse. Adaptive reuse and renovation design are becoming a major sector. There are many reasons for this. We have more and more buildings from the post-war of the 60s, 70s, the 50s even, that require significant updates and renovations. And we're also increasingly aware of the sustainability factors that drive less new construction. So, you know, this is a project that bridges both of those advantages. And yeah, I'm so looking forward for this being built. I have a lot of friends that used to text me when they knew that I won the competition and the design was still ongoing, about how uncomfortable it was, and yeah, it's going to change. This next project is an installation. So this is not an exhibition, it's an installation. It's called Anima, and Anima is a 20-meter long light installation for the Barcelona Lights Festival. And unlike a temporary or a permanent exhibition, where we curate a significant amount of information to present to visitors, an installation is all about an unforgettable moment. This installation was composed of thousands of fiber optic cables, and the desire was to connect people. So we tried to explore the idea that we are all equal and connected. Wait, sorry, I moved too fast. All equal and connected to a digital soul. By the way, the name Anima is soul, means soul in Latin. So this exhibition, this installation drew an incredible amount of attention, and we had 20,000 people in 3 days passing by that little corridor, and people were just fascinated, and they would take photos and, you know, post it on Instagram. It was incredible fun. Another ethos from our company, I believe this is actually the most important ethos in our company, is this project-centric philosophy, where we don't like to bring about our style. So we always design everything in white, or everything has to be, you know, curves or diagonals or whatever. The design is the result of the design process, which includes, you know, considerations such as the context, the philosophy of the client, who are we designing for, who, you know, the climate, etc. So it's all about the project, and it's project-centric, and we don't have a predefined style. Here's an example of a language which is very different from some of the other designs. This is quite a simple project. It's a gallery and a bar. And it's composed of two long corridors. One is the bar, the other one is the exhibition. And it's on the exhibition side, it's temporary also. It's photography, and different photographers have the opportunity to bring their pictures in. And every time you go to the bar, you're able to see new art. So it's sort of always renewing itself. So that sense of change. And then the facade was designed as a sort of a frame, you know, sort of a picture frame, which you can sit on it, and it creates a separation of space, a transition between the street side and the courtyard side. It's quite an interesting little building. Now we're going to go back to exhibition design. But in this case, it's just the exhibition design itself. We didn't design the architecture or the interiors for these buildings. This one is Bitter, and it's quite an interesting exhibition. In this case, we actually adapted the exhibition to two different museums. So the approach had to take flexibility and transportability into account. Let me tell you about Bitter first. This exhibition was commissioned by Tony's Chocolates. It's the biggest chocolate brand in the Netherlands. And they have a strong commitment to producing fair trade chocolate. And part of their revenue goes to sustainability and public awareness projects. So it's a very interesting client to work with. In the case of this company, their story and philosophy is crucial to them. To have a positive impact in the communities. This was something that we resonated with as designers. So we were really happy to deal with them. Now, the exhibition focused on bringing public awareness to the importance of fair trade. We wanted to stay away from easy, visually dramatic approaches. So instead, we focused on quiet portraits from workers and highlighted the interesting aspects of their culture and why it is important to protect and celebrate that local culture. And the installation was modular, so it was easily adaptable to different buildings. So you can see here, for example, there was one building, there was another building here with vastly different space qualities. And when I was telling you before about project-centric design, I told you about the different things that we bring into the design, and one of them, which is fundamental, is the partnership with the client, with the community. I truly believe that we cannot make the best possible outcome of a design if we don't allow the other stakeholders to contribute, to comment, to bring their stories and their ideas. And it is our duty as architects to then make the most out of that information and that dynamic. The final project that I have here is also a permanent, temporary exhibition, which in this case, it's sort of temporary exhibition / installation. It's called Studio Aleppo. And this is a traveling installation where photographers are invited to portray local citizens, regardless of background or nationality. The idea came from a Dutch photographer of war who discovered a series of film negatives on the floor of a bombed photography studio. You can see those negatives actually on the bottom right. So he collected these negatives and presented them in the Netherlands. And then the idea for Studio Aleppo was born. So in some cases, we conducted interviews with random citizens and presented the stories in text or in video format along with the photographic installation. And we go back again to the idea of sharing stories, and everyone has a story, even if it's told by a single photograph, a single frame. The images were produced, printed, and framed on site with the gallery open to the public. So we really like this idea of participation. So you can come into a museum and simply have a passive approach where you receive the information. That's absolutely fine, and in some cases it's ideal. But as much as possible, we try to create a dynamic interaction so people can come and be a part of what's going on. My presentation ends here. Remember, I told you a lot about storytelling. So architect May and myself, we are more than available now and in the coming days, weeks, months, to listen to ideas and to chat. Mostly, we want to hear your stories. Yeah, and I hope you enjoy these examples.
Okay. Thank you so much, Miguel, for that presentation. We thoroughly enjoyed the idea. I think the common thread for these two presentations is about the direct connection with the community, the narratives, and the experience, dynamic participation with the communities that you're working with. So this is really a very good example for us. That's like very global examples of your museum design experience. Okay, so we are now open for the questions from our participants, but let me just start the question and the ball rolling. Okay, so most of our participants are from the universities, higher education institutions, and in our survey, about 65% already have their buildings, now the museum buildings in place. So what would be your advice if there are already predefined, in quotation mark, predefined styles that are already in place and not reflective of the narrative of their museum? How would you reconcile this, and what advice could they get from you regarding this? Miguel or
is it
architect?
for me?
Yeah.
Miguel, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, May. I think it starts from, we have to start on the exhibition materials themselves. What is it that you want to communicate, right? Everything starts from there. So that's such a broad question, because what is it that we want to show people? Is it usually there's an element of education, right? When I go to a museum, I want to learn something. So how do you communicate that? The physical space will help that, but the style in which the envelope is created doesn't necessarily dictate what happens inside. So it's just a matter of, if it's a new design and you build, of course, the architect, the exhibition design specialist, we can coordinate, we can work together to create an encompassing experience. If it's an existing building, it will have certain limitations. And then that's where the creative mind comes into play, and we'll go around the limitations, turn them into strengths, and make sure that the museum will be engaging. And so the style is not so important to begin with.
Can I add to it?
Yes.
So if you have like the existing structure, and Miguel was saying you need to focus on the exhibited materials, put the installation there. I'll give a practical tip. We have to fix the toilets. So if we have the new installation and everything, we have to make sure that the toilets will actually be a reflection of that kind of an exhibit. So at least invest in that.
Yeah. Yes. So I totally agree with doing repair for the toilets, no, because that is the basic. If it's a necessity for the museums that we have, then you really have to work on it. Okay, so thank you for that. The second question that we now have is, okay, so we are still like the universities and local government units in the Philippines are still governed with this preconception of what a museum should be and should look like. No, and it's hard to disentangle that idea of theirs. But now you're showing us these new trends in museum design and approaches in museum building and all that. So could you give us an advice on how to persuade our local government or our university officials who are here now, who are planning to set up their museum? So this is like before the construction or before setting up. No? So there should be an intervention that should be made before these buildings are built, because they have their own idea of the museum, not based on the narrative. So how do we negotiate this kind of...
a lot of beautiful pictures. How else can you persuade, Miguel? A lot of beautiful images that translates the vision, that translates the vision of the project. So very conceptually directed images that it has to be a visual feast. At least that's for me. Miguel, do you want to add to that?
Partnership, right? So we have to be the illustrators of someone's initial idea, right? And will help to express that, in space. So we can't do that by ourselves, really, unless we have a good brief and the client, puts their heart out and say, this is what we want to say. So we got to work together. And in that process, we, the architects, will try our best to influence, to persuade the developer, whomever is trying to put a museum together, to do what we think is the best for their interest, the best for the interest of the visitors. And in some cases, we'll try to persuade you to invest a little bit more, because we feel that the returns are there and that the experience will be much better. And obviously, when we're talking about the government, it's always important that the government has, budget for culture. Culture is very important, and it's, it's something that sometimes is overlooked, but it shouldn't be.
Okay, thank you, Architect Miguel and Architect May. So with the current, there's another question here, with the current pandemic, so most of the museums are being, closed, and a lot in the ICOM study that there's a lot of museums that are being closed because of this. So can you actually design an online museum without the physical collection, with all the inputs that you have shared, like the philosophy, the design content? Can you actually build or design an online museum without the physical museum?
There are already virtual museums. The virtual museums. What we can probably do is come up with a 3D model of your museum, and then we can do an animation. And we can actually put it up online, and that's your virtual museum. And there's nothing physical, but everything's online. It can be done.
We have the meta world.
Yeah.
We have the meta world. Now you put some goggles and you go to the Guggenheim Museum. I don't know so much about the meta world, but anyway, yes, it is possible to do things in a virtual space and a non-physical space. And art can express itself beautifully in different modes, right? And these virtual, there can be beautiful creations, So I suppose it's possible. Because we're architects, we want people to still want to go to physical museums. Yes. And I don't think anything will ever replace the joy and the fulfillment of truly physical and physical reality, But yes, it is possible. Actually, a few years ago, I have this passion for a painter called Salvador Dali, Spanish painter, and he was a surrealist. And I've been to this museum in Florida, that it's the most valuable collection. It's a private collection of his works. And this was in 2016. There were these goggles, and these goggles allowed me to be in a 3D creation of one of his paintings. I was going insane, because this was like all of my dreams. I was in a space that was so visually appealing to me, particularly. And I had like 5 minutes, when there was a queue. So I finished and I walked back to the beginning, to the end of the queue, and done it again. That was, purely virtual, but it was incredibly exciting.
Yeah. Okay. So also we can, actually, there are also some of our participants don't have a physical museum yet, so they can actually explore that a possibility of setting up a virtual museum probably later on, right? So there's another question here about architecture and behavior. So what are your thoughts about architectural determinism, wherein architectural design solutions should change community behavior of a predictable and positive way? which is also something museums should strive for. So this is now the connection of the museum design of the building. Now, how does that affect, for instance, the behavior of visitors coming in? How does that affect? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Can I start, Miguel?
Yes.
I think environment, your physical environment can dictate one's behavior. If you have a beautiful environment, it makes you want to feel beautiful. It makes you want to behave well. So that outside reality dictates that behavior, that human behavior. So if you have a beautiful space, you feel like you want to dress up. You feel like you want to be decent. And then if your space is a lot of junk, you're in the junkyard and you're not comfortable, you don't really care what you look like, how you behave. So I think there is a really, really very close correlation between your designed environment and human behavior.
Yeah,
Miguel?
so people dress up to go to the museums to go. So
this was a very interesting question, and it was quite deep. Perhaps too deep for someone at 3 a.m. in the morning, but I'll try my best. I think that museums can be a space of the word that comes to mind is avant-garde, like of that trend setting, and there are changes constantly in our societies. And so museum spaces can be in the forefront of the possibilities. And I know this is a very broad answer, but I think that question generates a very interesting debate.
All right. Okay, thank you, Architect May and our Architect Miguel. So right now, if you've been to the Philippines and you are aware of these national museums, now we have national museums located in Manila. And now we are trying to, the program itself, this museum webinar and all that is actually trying to decentralize the idea of local museums, from the regions or from the provinces, to encourage them to set up their own museums as well. So what are your advice, for instance, if a local museum would like to use organic materials such as coconut, bamboos, wood, and all that are found commonly found in their environment to use? Would you advise this? Because of course there are issues of whether that's sturdy, whether that's appropriate for the museum, and then of course the security of the building. So how do you balance this use of organic materials versus what we see as the more dominant concrete designed museums?
Okay, do you want to answer, Miguel, or do you want me to answer?
You can start.
Okay, I'll start. Okay, when we look at bamboos, when we look at abaca, there's a lot of character there, coconut and all. As much as we want to use them, we can use them as an additive, but you don't depend on them structurally. So you can bring them into your design, but do not depend on them to protect the museum as like 100% bamboo and everything. Because if you do that, if you do that, it's not going to be as practical and as cost effective as you would want it to be. I mean, conceptually, it would be, you would think it's going to be cheaper because it's the indigenous materials that you have, but it does not have the properties to how you want them to perform. So don't ask David to perform Goliath's performance. No, what you can probably do is celebrate it and celebrate those materials, and just be clever enough to bring them. You can still bring them in and use it as much as it can perform. And you can actually marry it with your practical materials. Because I've done bahay kubos and it's not performing. It didn't perform well for me. So I know their properties. I use cacahuate. I use coconut. I use all of them. When I was a younger architect, I've been using a lot of indigenous materials. But most of these workers do not also have that proper skills or knowledge on how to treat these materials unless you have that skill and you have a sophisticated science that backs it up. So go ahead, Miguel, it's your turn.
Two words that I capture that I think are important. One is knowledge, you just said it, and before was balance. So I think there needs to be a balance between traditional materials and more conventional structural architectural materials, right? This balance is important. So one is balance, the other one is knowledge. I think it would be very important for the architectural team or the museum team in general that's putting together a museum to understand the crafts of the region, to understand the materials that are used, to observe who does what and what are the capabilities of the material before designing, understanding what the palette of options are, and then take that into that balance. Because one thing I don't like is a gimmick. So, for example, if I'm going to put some bamboo in front of a wall just because it's a material, but it serves no purpose, then it's a gimmick and it doesn't work. It needs to be placed in a way where the natural qualities are put into use in some way. And just going back to the beginning of the question, I love the idea that there is this decentralization of intellectual power and property, that we're bringing it back to the smaller communities. I have many friends from the Philippines that I've worked with in different countries. And when I was every time I went to the Philippines, and I've been to the Philippines more than 50 times. And one of the things that I used to like was where are you from? I mean, in my band, I had a rock band in Singapore. There were 3 Filipinos in a band of 5. And where are you from? And I always hear about a place that I haven't heard before, and they tell me how to get there and how beautiful. They show me some photos. So there's clearly differences in the cultures between the different regions, and some regions are quite remote from others. So it even takes a long time to get there. And the Philippines is not that big a country, but it takes a long time sometimes. And so it's great to hear that these communities and these local cultures are having a voice. Or a greater voice. So this is it's fantastic to hear.
Yeah. So I've worked with some local museums that are community led or initiated by schools. So they built a small museums within the classroom setting or in remote areas where you'll be surprised that there's a very fantastic collection of their culture. So these are the students and teachers who are bringing artifacts from their homes to be part of this collection, to be part of this collective of identity making in their provinces. No? So it would be also interesting to look at that and perhaps later on how we can help them build a small museum that is appropriate for preventive conservation in relation to the artifacts that they have. So it's good to see this now, the kind of decentralization. Okay, another question, this just came in. What do you think about open museums? Because you presented a built structure with fantastic design. What do you think about open museums where the museums are located in different areas in the communities, and how do we approach that in that manner? open.
Are they like just installation?
For instance, in Ifugao, it's like, if you're familiar with the rice terraces, so they built traditional Ifugao houses in different areas. And in each stop, they would have a feature on, let's say, weaving. The second one will be on wood carving. No? So have you encountered
That's
such?
beautiful. We can actually incorporate that in trails. We can incorporate those exhibit materials and create like a trail system, because if it's like in open, and then instead of a resting place, because I'm a trail designer, I do a lot of recreational facilities, and we can incorporate some stuff like that. For it could be a knowledge trail, or it could be a discovery trail. It's an exploration trail. And we can do a lot of creative things about it, but always incorporate it in trails. So there's a system. There will be a system to it. What do you think of that, Miguel?
Yeah, that's actually, you helped me understand the question a little bit more. Yeah, I totally agree. I don't have anything else to add.
Okay. But maybe if it's going to be in the remote areas, we will have to consider for how do we protect the materials?
Yeah, that's an
how will it be lit at night? Do we want it lit at night? Is it turned off? How about the source of power? So those are the things that to consider. Solar, we can actually collect light in the morning during the day, and then we can have like solar lights to provide lighting in the evening or during the sunset. And how do you protect it from, because we have a lot of humidity.
Yeah,
you need to consider humidity, and how will you protect it from getting always wet. You go to the province, you climb the mountains. I've for the past few months, I've climbed 2 mountains. So you'll have to provide for that. You have to understand what kind of shading, sunshade, and just protection from the element devices that we need to integrate into your open museum or your open installation. That's about it.
All right, thank you. We have a question from one of our participants. So the question goes, buildings need most of retrofitting because of natural hazards such as typhoons, flood, which mostly affect our city. It is also important to take note of this setting up in a museum. Okay, the question is, can a building have a minimum provision for disaster preparedness, such as the ones mentioned, typhoons, flood, etc., fire? So like, is it all right to have a minimum provision, disaster preparedness in the museum, such as fire extinguisher and water sprinkler against fire incidents? So what are your thoughts?
That's a standard. There are codes to protect the infrastructure, the buildings. That's why I mentioned the technical due diligence. So within your technical due diligence, you need to already know the flood study, the instances of flood. But if it's already in the flood-prone area, you need to take it to the next level. Make sure, know your levels, know the flood levels, and don't put it at below. Don't put it below the flood level. So bring it up and proof it already in case of, be resilient in terms of considering your design, your museum design.
Okay, thank you. This is just a follow-up from the earlier question about using organic materials. No? So question from the participant, how do you balance the need to create a building that stands out from the surrounding environment while also looking at the organic and connection to the environment that is being built on?
That's
question. Can I repeat it again?
No, it's okay. In order to make a design stand out, it doesn't need to be a glass box, you know. So actually one can argue if we're in an urban environment, doing something which is strongly organic in nature and it's using wood or leaves or bamboos or stones and gravel, whatever, it will stand out even more. So it's perfectly fine to use sustainable materials, to have a building that screams both, I want to have a positive impact on the climate and I'm sexy, so it's listen, we're architects, so we want to design something which is beautiful and people will look when driving down the street or seeing it on the hill or wherever, and they go like, wow, that's a beautiful composition of volumes of materials, whatever. So don't get me wrong, obviously we like to design that, and we can do it whichever way. It's like you can have, it's just let your imagination run free, but know the local, know the culture, know the types of materials and the techniques that will help you. Yeah, so there's a lot of groundwork to do and a lot of investigation, like May was explaining in her presentation yesterday.
All right.
So it's site context. If you really want to marry your site into the indigenous site or the natural environment into your architecture, the designer has to come up with a beautiful organic architecture. So organic architecture is inspired by nature, and you can actually do that in architecture. We just have a lot of bad examples around, but if you really get the correct architect, the architect can really do it for you, the right balance of it. Am I right, Miguel? Of course.
Yeah, we have
Because
seen.
there are a lot of gimmicks. There are a lot of gimmicks out there. The stuff that you see here, I call them pastiche. They just slap on some cladding and that's it. That's architecture. Is it a decision by the architect? Maybe yes, maybe no. Maybe it's a decision of the developer. There are a lot of stories behind one building, why it became so. So yeah.
Yeah.
That's why you have to champion design.
Yeah, we have seen museum buildings around Philippines that are inspired by local architecture from the people themselves. But sometimes you find it sometimes inefficient, like the ceiling is too low because they're following a certain concept. So sometimes it's difficult to negotiate. So for that matter, no. Anyway, so there's another question here from our participant. In building a museum, is it the sole responsibility of the architects to make sure that there is community engagement that provides moral dimension to the architecture, so that the people in the community have stake in what building should be built around them? So the question is it the sole responsibility of the architects to have this engagement with the community? And yeah, I mean, what do you think?
There's a big part of the influence. It is not a sole responsibility, but that is one of the goals of being an architect. It's because we're gonna create some social. It's a social architecture. So architecture is meant for the people. So we engage. We engage this structure for the community, or for what purpose it is for. So it is not a sole responsibility, but we can actually have a great influence of it in terms of translating the requirements of the project proponent. Miguel, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was at a hotel last weekend. It was a beautiful hotel. It's an old palace from the 18th century, and after that family donated it to the local authorities about 100 years ago, it's been mostly derelict. And then about 10 years ago, a big hotel company here in Portugal got the permit to develop it and to create a hotel, but there were some catches. And so now I'm going to jump forward to when I was at the hotel. I noticed that there was a permanent exhibition of artifacts that have been found in that site and within the palace. Now, who came up with the idea of that exhibition? Was it the architect? Was it the local authorities that that negotiated an agreement with that company to use that space, which is basically a concession? Was it the developer themselves? This hotel brand? I don't know, but I like to think that all of them have an open microphone to step and say, hey, here's an idea, we want to do this. And the architect certainly has the duty to think of ways to bring more dimensions to the space. And I think especially in the case of museums usually display art. Not always, sometimes it's science and things like that, but in art belongs to all of us, and anyone can make art, right? So it is a very community driven enterprise, or it should be. So whether it's the local authorities that are pushing that conversation, or the architects, as long as that conversation happens, and then people have the opportunity to put their art somewhere that can be shared, or go and see things that kids can look and they feel inspired by, and they want to become this and that, and so they'll be more focused to study and to pursue their dreams. It has a good impact in society.
Okay, thank you, Miguel and Architect May. So there's a question here. What is your take on brutalist style architecture in museum design in the Philippine context? What is your take on brutalist style architecture in museum design in the Philippine context?
Brutalist.
Go ahead, man.
Brutalist. Well, actually, I tapped on this before. I don't know, brutalist, deconstructivism. Brutalist is you can bring the outside in, the inside out. You mish and mash your architecture to create a compelling architecture because you want to be noticed. You want to be sexy, something like that. But like what I said, establish your base. If you intend to do something like that, you have to have the mastery of the basic design principles before you can deconstruct. It, because there's a lot of wrong things that can happen if you complicate the design. To me, simplicity is paramount. Simplicity is not simple because it has a lot of detail to make it perform efficiently. So brutalists, those people who does that should be really freaks of nature. They are the Zaha Hadids, the Frank Gehry's of our time, but not all of us are anomalies. Most of us are regular people. So those are what you call very talented geniuses. And Frank Lloyd Wright is one of the geniuses of our time. And his works still have leaks. They're not watertight. Zaha Hadid's work, they're not watertight, especially Frank Gehry's. So don't be daunted with so much design on brutalism, deconstructivism. Look for the practicality. Look for a well-designed architecture. it has to have the mastery of the basic design principles. That's my take on it. Miguel?
Can I hear the question again?
What is your take on the brutalist architecture in the of museums in the Philippine context?
Okay. Well, brutalism is a style that I think it started in the late 60s, but it's mostly associated with the 70s. And for example, in Singapore, there is a lot of brutalist buildings, also because it coincided with the boom of the economy. So Singapore was created in 65, and in the 70s, things started to happen. And obviously that was the style, or one of the styles that was in vogue at the time. In the Philippines, I have noticed a number of brutalist buildings, mostly in Manila. I'm not sure if it's considered, but it looks to me Terminal 1 of the international airport in Manila, it looks like it's brutalist, and I find it quite beautiful, to be honest. I think it's very well proportioned. There is a building south of Rojas Boulevard towards the seaside, which is also this big brutalist building. I don't know if it's a museum or if it's like a concert hall or something.
Cultural
Is that Conrad? Is that Conrad Museum? Is that Conrad Hotel? Is that the Conrad Hotel?
No.
I thought it was a cultural building, but anyway, I've seen some of these.
CCP.
CCP.
Okay, it's a very interesting style. It's completely out of fashion these days, but the characteristics of brutalism are single material. It's usually all concrete, right? It pays a lot of emphasis on the movement on the ground level. So you have usually these open galleries underneath the building, and it's very futuristic in a way. In its, I think in its conception. But it's interesting that you ask specifically about brutalism, because it's, brutalism eventually disappeared in the 80s with the dawn of postmodernism. But in London, there is an incredible example of brutalism. It's called the Barbican Center. And it's a big set of buildings. It has a museum and a concert performance hall. And you go there and you think, okay, this looks 70s, but at the same time, you're like, wow, this still looks impressive. So yeah, I am not so aware of how many examples of brutalism there are that you may be referring to. But I think right now, those buildings are probably in need of some kind of, renovation, considering that 50 years have passed. And so brutalism actually is the structure of it, and the big planes of solid walls, etc., that it allows for something to be done to kind of bring a new life to it. Yeah, I think that a lot of those buildings will soon become objects of adaptive reuse.
Okay, thank you, Architect Miguel and Architect May. So we were just reading a material on dark museums. So these dark museums in relation to, let's say, the Holocaust and human rights museum. So we have in Manila the Human Rights Museum. It's still currently being built. So we have some participants there, and they are seeking. How do we conceptualize that? Because the concept itself is quite controversial, and it touches a lot of issues. So how do we approach this style and the narrative itself in building their museum?
I have an example of what I consider, based on how you approached it, what would be a dark museum, and it's the Holocaust Museum in Berlin.
Yeah, the one.
And this was something that I visited when it opened. I was a student, and I was incredibly impressed by it, because the exhibition in that case was the emotions the space was producing in us. And there were some displays there that brought information, and I was so impressed at how the architect was able to manipulate light, sound, shade in order to emphasize the emotions that the collection was intending to create. So that specific theme or subject of, like, I don't know, war, there's a lot of war museums in the world, etc. Architecture can help to set a mood, recently I was in Chile just in December, and I visited the museum of the Museum of the Dictatorship. They had a very, very nasty dictatorship for 20 years in the 70s and 80s. And I left that museum in a little bit of agony, but I was happy with that agony because it paid respect to the struggle of all the stories that were being told in that museum. So I think architecture plays an important role in that type of exhibitions. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Miguel, for that insight. No? So there are no more questions from our participants. Thank you so much for participating in this morning's event. Would you like to say some advice and some last words to our participants here who are wanting to set up their museums and those museums that needs reinvigoration? So any last words from you guys?
Okay, so good luck, and I hope you make the right choices in terms of preparing your terms of references, getting all the experts in your team, and you have to choose the right players. And it's an exciting journey to come up with such museum projects. So good luck to everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I would say just be very clear about the objective, what you're trying to do, because at the end of the journey, that objective needs to be fulfilled. So yeah, just have clarity about what you intend to do.
Okay, there's one more question. Just that pop in. Can you take one more question?
One more. I need to go to sleep.
Okay.
Okay.
What are the safeguards needed if the museum is located near the seashore? Like we have in Visayas region, some museums are located in the seashore. So what are your advice on this? Safeguards needed if the museum is located near the seashore.
So you have to make sure that your materials are it can fight against corrosion. Yeah. Because there's a lot of salt, salt in the air, so it attacks the materials. And since you have a lot of water, there's a lot of humidity, so you need to take care of your materials. Make sure they are properly ventilated, and the air conditioning systems will be your friend in terms of taking care of your materials in the nearby seashore museum.
All right, Miguel, that's fine.
Nothing to add.
All right.
May was right on point.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much to our world-class architects for joining us this morning. Thank you so much, Miguel. I know it's 3 a.m. in the morning in Portugal, and thank you so much for your time.
3:44.
3:44 for a.m. Thank you so much.
Don't sleep anymore. We don't
sleep anymore.
Architects don't sleep.
Yes, we hope to both of you can come and visit Museo Kordilyera, and maybe you can sit down with us. And later on, we'll have on July we are bringing in participants and bringing in their museum proposals and design, and hope you can help us with that as well. So thank you, Miguel, and thank you, Architect May, for joining us this morning. Have a good night, Miguel. Have a good morning to everyone. All right.
Bye.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. So for our participants, we have the feedback form. Please fill that in for your attendance. And next week, March 24 and 25, we go to collections management. We will be talking about conservation, preventive conservation, with our guest speaker, Miss June Dalisay. So she's our esteemed senior conservator in Manila from the Artemis Art Restoration Services. So we are excited about this one. So I hope you can join us next week. And on March 25th, on a Friday, we will have Peter John Natividad, who's the arts management consultant of the Lopez Museum and Library, and also the vice head of the National Committee on Museums in NCCA. So we have star-studded resource persons next week. Please don't miss it. No, very important and very instructional for all of us. Useful information. Okay, so have a good afternoon, have a hearty lunch, and we'll see you next week. Thank you very much and have a good morning.